G'day, I'm Tim Thompson. Have you ever used a wire spinner, thought you'd bought the best one you possibly could and ended up in all sorts of tangles and strife? When I talk to manufacturers of wire and wire spinners, they keep telling me the same thing. They wish people knew the basics about loading their wire and running it out so that they avoided all of the tangling problems that they commonly get complaints about. So today's video is a short, simple one. It goes through the basics of using a wire spinner so that you have the best success you possibly can. And hey, if you like today's video, don't forget, hit the little subscribe button down there, give it a thumbs up, and check out all my stuff on timthompson.ag. Lots of old videos, tips, and products that have been tried and tested. One of the most common customer complaints that wire spinner manufacturers have is from customers who buy their product and then complain that the coils of wire they run out keep binding up and tangling. Well, if you follow two simple basic rules, it just won't happen to you. First is, make sure that you orient the coil of wire upwards. There is an up and a down. There is a start and a stop to a coil of wire, and this is determined by how the wire is coiled on the machine to begin with. So there is always going to be an end to start with. Now, how do you tell the difference? Well, quite often, like there is in this case with a spiral fast, there will be a joiner attached to the end of the wire that you're supposed to start from. If there's no joiner, quite often the binding wire that holds the coils together will have a little knot at the top. As long as you mount your coil of wire with that knot pointing upwards in your spinner, you know that you've oriented it from start to finish. If you buy a coil of wire where the knots are tied on the side, have a look at the label on the wire. If the writing is the right way up and it says start this end, you know that you've oriented your coil of wire in the right direction and you should avoid 90% of tangles. So let's put all that together now and mount wire in our spinner so it won't tangle. The first thing we want to do is we want to locate on the coil of wire where the knots are. Now this particular wire has knots to the top, so that orients my coil of wire upwards. If I didn't have those knots, I would look for a label and I would check that the writing was facing up the right way. Once I've oriented it from bottom to top, I place it into the cradle of my wire spinner. Then I locate the end of the wire that I want to start from. This end of wire will either have the tag placed on it, or it will have some sort of joining system like this spiral fast that signifies this is the end you start pulling from. Once I'm sure that the wire is located in the spinner correctly and that the knots are in the right direction, then I can simply cut all the binding wire and remove it. Now on that, make sure that you remove all of the binding wire and you don't leave any little bits behind. Not only will that cause hardware disease in your stock if you're doing this outside, but it could be another source of jamming. So take your time when you're removing all of the binding wire to make sure that you remove all of it and you don't leave some behind to help coil and tangle your wire. Now that we've got all our knots cut off, we're just about ready to start running out the wire. But before we do, the first half dozen coils, pick them up and make sure that they haven't looped over each other in transport. This is a step that a lot of people don't do. If you're going to get a jam in your coil of wire, it will likely be in the first half a dozen coils that you start running out. So lift them up, let them get slack, make sure that there's no crossover, and that'll stop 90% of the jams in your wire spinner. Now that you're sure the wire is unspooled and ready to go, locate your wire in your guide if you have one and start pulling out your wire. Do the first 20 to 30 meters by hand. Walk it out. I know it might be machine mounted like a professional spinner like this, but once again, if you're going to get a tangle, it'll be in the first few meters. So pull the first few meters out yourself by hand and you can fix up any tangles before you get a big one and it pulls the spinner off the machine. Now we're ready to go with tangle-free, hassle-free running out of wire. Now, another important point to make, as soon as you start mucking around with wire spinners and running out wire, you're mucking around with wire under tension, so immediately, safety glasses please. You can lose an eye in an instant. It's just not worth the hassle. Another quick tip, when you guys have finished running out a roll of wire, maybe you need to change it for a different diameter wire for a different job, or maybe you simply want to take the spinner apart and take the wire out of it to make it easier to carry. There's a couple of tips to tying your bundle of wire carefully so that next time when you mount it on the spinner, it doesn't get all tangled. The first tip is put a decent bend, a hook, in the end that you're going to be pulling from next time. That way you don't confuse it with the other end of the roll. Once you've done that, bind your roll together so it doesn't move around and run loops and run coils with a few cable ties, and orient the cable ties so that they face the top of the roll. That way when it comes to putting your roll on your next spinner, you know which orientation your roll should be at. You know what's top and what's bottom. Taking a few minutes and putting these cable ties on, 3 or 4 of them, is going to give you a much easier roll of wire to work with next time. You're going to know the top from the bottom, and you're also going to know which end to pull out from. As an extra measure, when you're doing up the cable tie near your free end, leave it free so that you've got about ½ metre of wire loose, and you can easily recognise which bit of the wire you're going to pull on. Now we're ready to take the wire off the spinner, and even if I happen to drop it, it's not going to get all mucked up and I'm not going to end up in tangles. If you like this video and you find it helpful, please hit the little subscribe button down there, give it a thumbs up, and hey, check out all my stuff on timthompson.ag for plenty of curated content,